She leaned against the frame of her half-open door, a glass of red wine in hand, and said it like she almost didn't mean to. "This is crazy." The words weren't scolding. They were softer than that, almost a confession. And before I could stop myself, the answer slipped out, low, steady, too honest for the moment. "Then go crazy with me." The hallway between us went still. All I could hear was the hum of the ceiling light above and the faint clink as she set her glass down on the table behind her. Her name was Claire. Mid-40s, though the way she carried herself made numbers feel irrelevant. She had that kind of presence that filled a room without trying, hair falling loose from a bun, a white blouse buttoned one too high, like she'd been caught between casual and careful. I was 24, too young to play it safe, too restless not to notice the quiet beauty across the hall from me. I told myself for months that she was just a neighbor, nothing more. But the way her eyes lingered on me now, as if weighing something she shouldn't, told a different story. It started with something simple, a casserole dish I'd returned, a polite thank you at her door. But tonight, it wasn't politeness that kept either of us standing there. It was the silence that felt too full, the way her hand brushed against mine as I passed the dish back, lingering for a second too long. Her skin was warm, warm enough that I kept my hand at my side, tingling, not trusting what it might do if I reached again. "You shouldn't," she began, voice quiet. Then she stopped. Her throat worked as she swallowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. I stepped just close enough that I could catch the faint trace of her perfume, floral, restrained, like something chosen for herself rather than anyone else. "Neither should you," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She looked up then. Our eyes caught, held. Hers were tired, but not in a way that made her weaker, more like she'd lived through things I couldn't name. For the first time, she didn't hide it. She let me see her, and the weight of that made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. The air between us thickened. I could hear the soft tick of the clock in her apartment, smelled the faint sweetness of the wine she'd left on the table. Every detail seemed sharper, almost unbearable. She shifted, almost imperceptibly, like she wanted to move closer but was tethered to something I couldn't see. I couldn't stop myself from noticing the way her fingers curled against the doorframe, as if holding herself back. "You don't understand," she said, barely above a whisper. "Then tell me." Her lips parted like she might, but nothing came. Instead, her breath trembled, and she shook her head as if words would betray her. I should have stepped away. I should have broken the moment before it pulled me under. But instead I reached, just a little. My hand brushed hers again. This time, she didn't move. The world seemed to shrink until it was only the soft press of her skin against mine, the heat of her body standing inches away, the question that neither of us dared to put into words. Her eyes closed for a fraction of a second, and when they opened, there was something raw in them, something that made my pulse trip over itself. And then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. A neighbor's door opened, keys jingling. She pulled her hand back too quickly, straightened, smoothed the blouse she'd forgotten about. "Good night," she said, voice too even, too practiced. But as she closed the door, her gaze lingered one moment longer than it should have, and I knew this wasn't over. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw hers, the way they lingered on me a second longer than they should have before she shut the door. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Just a slip, a neighborly kindness mistaken for something more. But that didn't stop me from noticing the light under her door when I came home late, or the way she always left her balcony window cracked, the faint sound of a record player drifting across the night air. Claire had a way of being present even when she wasn't in the room. A week passed before I saw her again. She was carrying groceries up the narrow stairs, arms full, keys clinking against her wrist. I caught up and offered to help. She hesitated, her usual pause, like every favor carried weight, but then gave a small smile and handed me a bag. Inside her apartment, I set the groceries down on the counter, trying not to stare at the faint line of tiredness under her eyes, the looseness of her sweater sliding off one shoulder. "You don't have to keep rescuing me," she said, pulling a carton of milk from the bag. Maybe I want to. That earned me a quick look, half amused, half warning. She tucked her hair behind her ear, a small, nervous gesture I hadn't seen before. It came out in pieces while we unpacked. She'd been divorced for almost 5 years. No children, though she'd wanted them once. Life doesn't always take the shape you imagine, she said, her voice softer as she lined up the cans in her pantry. I told her about my last relationship, how it had ended quietly, a drifting apart more than a blow-up. I think I was too young to know what I wanted, I admitted. She gave a small laugh, though there wasn't much humor in it. You still are. The words should have stung, but the way she said them, gentle, almost protective, made my chest tighten. Later, as I reached for a glass on the top shelf, she stepped close behind me. Too close. Her hand brushed my arm as she steadied the shelf, and the air shifted, charged. I felt her breath at the back of my neck, warm and unsteady. I froze, afraid even the smallest movement would break the fragile thread between us. When I finally turned, she was already retreating, pretending to fuss with the grocery bags. But the space between us had changed. We ended up sitting at her small kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us. The silence was comfortable at first, then not. I caught myself watching the way her fingers circled the rim of her cup, how she avoided looking at me for too long. You know people would talk, she said finally. Let them. Her lips pressed together, like she was holding back 100 words she couldn't say. The silence stretched, heavy, unbearable, until she reached across the table, almost absently, and touched my hand. Not a full grasp, not a declaration. Just a quiet press of her fingertips against mine. She didn't pull away this time. And neither did I. The touch at her kitchen table haunted me. It was nothing, just fingertips against mine, fleeting. Yet it rewrote everything. For days we avoided each other. Or maybe she avoided me. The sound of her lock clicking in the morning came a little earlier, her curtains drawn tighter at night. Still, I caught her shadow sometimes, passing the hallway, pausing just a fraction too long when she thought I wasn't looking. It happened on a rainy evening. I came home soaked, carrying takeout, and saw her door ajar. A flicker of hesitation, then I knocked. Come in, she called, distracted. She was kneeling by the couch, gathering papers scattered across the floor. A gust from the open window had tossed them everywhere. I bent to help, and suddenly we were inches apart, both reaching for the same sheet. My hand covered hers. Warm. Steady. She froze, eyes locked on mine. Neither of us moved. You should go, she whispered, but didn't take her hand back. The knock on her door shattered it. Claire? A voice called, a neighbor, an older woman from the second floor. Claire jolted, pulled her hand away, pressed a finger to her lips. I stepped back as she smoothed her blouse and answered, voice perfectly calm. Yes? The neighbor asked about the rain leaking into the stairwell, lingering too long, chatting in that nosy way people do. I stood behind the couch, heart pounding, praying the woman wouldn't glance past her shoulder. When the door finally closed, Claire leaned against it, eyes shut, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for years. You see? She murmured. This is what I mean. People talk. They always talk. Let them, I said again, softer this time. Her laugh was brittle. You don't know what it costs. I wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped me. Not anger, fear. A kind of guilt I couldn't name. The papers were gathered, the window closed, but neither of us sat down. Instead, we drifted closer, drawn by something neither of us dared admit. She stood by the counter, I by the table, until the space between us felt unbearable. Her eyes flicked to my lips, then away. I stepped closer, enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her body, smelled the trace of wine on her breath. Don't, she whispered, though she didn't move. My hand hovered, not touching, just near her arm. Then tell me to stop. She didn't. Her chest rose, unsteady, her lips parting like she might say something, but the words never came. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. My pulse thudded in my ears. Her hand trembled at her side, then, almost against her will, brushed against mine. Not enough to be a kiss. Not enough to cross the line. But more than enough to make it impossible to go back. I tried to tell myself distance would cool things down. A day or two of silence, a polite smile in the hallway, nothing more. But distance didn't help, it only made everything sharper. By the fourth night, I couldn't take it. I knocked. She opened the door slowly, as though she already knew it would be me. Her hair was loose this time, damp from a shower, sweater hanging soft against her frame. She didn't invite me in, but she didn't shut the door either. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice low. "Trying not to lose my mind," I said. Her eyes closed briefly, like the words cut too close. She stepped aside. The air inside her apartment was warm, scented faintly of lavender soap. She stayed near the window, arms folded as if she could shield herself. "This is wrong," she said. "You know that." I moved closer, stopping just short of her. "Then why aren't you sending me away?" Her breath caught, quick, betraying her. "Because I can't," she whispered. Something in me snapped at that. My hand rose, slow, cautious, brushing a strand of damp hair from her cheek. Her skin was soft, still warm from the shower. She leaned, barely, into the touch, eyes fluttering shut before she forced herself back. "You don't understand," she said again, voice trembling now. "You're young. You still have time. I don't. People will laugh. They'll think, I don't care what they think." The words came out rough, too raw, and for the first time she met my eyes without looking away. Something in her broke then, and it wasn't weakness, it was surrender. Her arms loosened. Her body swayed just enough that I caught her elbow, steadying her. She didn't pull back. Silence pressed in around us, filled only by the rain starting against the windowpane. My hand slipped from her elbow down to her wrist, fingers circling lightly. Her pulse thudded beneath my touch, fast, betraying her calm facade. "Claire," I murmured, leaning close, my lips just at her ear. Her breath shivered out, brushing against my neck. "This can't happen," she whispered. "Then stop me." She didn't. Instead, her hand came up, trembling, resting against my chest. I felt the heat of her palm through my shirt, the hesitation in her fingers. She was holding me back, or pulling me closer. Maybe both. I lowered my head until our foreheads touched, the world narrowing to the softness of her breath mingling with mine. My nose brushed hers. Her lips parted. It would only take an inch, less than that, and everything would change. "God, this is madness," she breathed, her voice breaking. The sound of keys jingled suddenly outside her door. Footsteps stopped just beyond, the faint scrape of metal against the lock. We both froze. Her eyes widened, inches from mine. My heart pounded so loud I was sure whoever was at the door could hear it. The doorknob turned. The door opened just enough for Claire to step back, her hand flying from my chest as though burned. A younger voice called from the hall. "Mom? You home?" My stomach dropped. She hadn't mentioned a daughter. A rush of footsteps followed, and then a girl, college age, damp from the rain, appeared in the doorway. Claire's daughter. I tried to steady my face, step casual, but the heat still clung to the room, to my skin, to the space between us. Claire's hand trembled as she tucked her hair back, forcing a smile. "This is Daniel," she said too quickly. "He's my neighbor. He was just helping with." Her daughter's eyes flicked from me to her. Something sharpened there, suspicion cutting through the damp evening. "Helping with what?" Claire faltered, then moved past her, taking the grocery bag the girl carried as though to shield herself. The room filled with the sound of plastic crinkling, the thud of apples hitting the counter, mundane noises that only made the tension scream louder. I mumbled something about leaving, but Claire stopped me, her hand brushing my sleeve, quick, desperate, almost invisible. "Stay. Just a minute." The touch was fleeting, but it left a charge under my skin. I nodded, though my pulse thudded too fast. We sat awkwardly in her kitchen, the three of us, her daughter filling the silence with stories from her week. Claire smiled, nodded, but her eyes kept drifting, toward me, away again, guilty, longing, torn. When the girl excused herself to shower, the sound of running water soon filled the apartment. Claire turned to me, her voice breaking in a whisper. You weren't supposed to meet her. Not like this. Why not? I asked. Because she'll know. She'll see it on my face. The confession hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, not from shame but from the raw honesty in her eyes. She stepped closer, voice trembling. I told myself this was nothing. That it would stop. But when you touched me... Her voice caught. She pressed a hand against her own arm, as though holding herself together. It's not nothing. I moved before I could think, closing the space between us. My fingers brushed her wrist, then slid up, steadying her trembling hand. Then stop pretending, I whispered. Her body leaned, just slightly, toward mine. Every nerve in me screamed to pull her closer, kiss her, forget everything else. But she turned at the last second, pressing her forehead against my shoulder instead. The heat of her body against mine was unbearable, sweet and suffocating. She clung for a heartbeat, then pulled back abruptly, eyes wet, voice low. This will ruin me, she said. It will ruin us both. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hand still rested on her arm, unwilling to let go. She looked at me then, raw, unguarded, and utterly undone. And instead of pushing me away, she whispered, almost too soft to hear. Don't leave me tonight. Her words, don't leave me tonight, hung in the room, trembling between confession and plea. I should have asked what she meant. I should have given her space to take it back. Instead, I stepped closer. She didn't move. The sound of her daughter's shower running down the hall became a strange sort of permission, white noise that swallowed the danger of being overheard. But the risk still pressed at us, sharp, undeniable. Claire, I whispered, my voice too low, too rough. Her eyes met mine, and the fight inside them was gone. What replaced it wasn't calm, it was surrender. She lifted a hand, hesitant at first, and touched my jaw. Just her fingertips, feather-light, as if memorizing the shape of me. Her body leaned, drawn forward by something she no longer wanted to resist. I caught her wrist, held it against my cheek, anchoring us both. My other hand hovered at her waist, not daring to close the space. The heat of her body radiated toward me, every inch an invitation I was afraid to accept, afraid not to. This is everything I told myself I'd never do, she murmured. Then do it anyway. Her breath shook against my skin. The distance closed in fragments. A shift of her body. My thumb brushing over her knuckles. Her forehead tipping to mine, soft, trembling. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. But it was everything that led to one. The air thickened, heavy with her perfume, her warmth, the raw pulse of wanting. You don't understand what this costs, she said again, barely audible. Then let me pay it with you. Her laugh broke into something almost like a sob, small and helpless. And then, finally, her lips brushed mine. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It was messy, hesitant at first, almost afraid, but real. Her hand tightened in my shirt, pulling me closer, then loosening as if she couldn't decide whether to hold me or let me go. When we parted, her eyes were wet, her breath ragged. God, what are we doing? Something neither of us can undo, I said. And the truth of it landed heavy between us. She stepped back, wiping at her cheek, then shook her head as though trying to gather herself. But instead of closing off, she looked at me, really looked. No defenses, no polite smiles. Just a woman who had spent years building walls, now letting me see over them. I thought I was too old to feel this again, she whispered. But you make me feel like I'm still alive. Her confession left me unsteady, raw. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't flinch. She held on. No excuses. No pretending. Just the quiet, terrifying clarity that whatever this was, it was ours now. The rain had stopped by the time silence settled between us again. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, steady and grounding, as though daring us to breathe like nothing had changed. But everything had. Claire's hand was still in mine, her thumb brushing over my knuckles like she couldn't decide whether to let go or hold tighter. Her eyes, tired, beautiful, unguarded, searched mine as if waiting for me to be the one to break this fragile truth apart. I didn't. Instead, I pulled her gently closer until she was within the circle of my arms. At first she was stiff, as though some instinct told her to resist, to keep the walls high. But then her head dropped against my chest, her breath sinking into me, and she gave in. "I've been so afraid," she murmured, her voice muffled by my shirt. "Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of wanting something I shouldn't." I smoothed her hair back, the strands damp and soft beneath my fingers. "And now?" She tilted her face up, her cheek brushing against me, her lips just inches from mine. "Now I'm afraid of losing this before it even begins." The words pierced something in me. I pressed my forehead to hers, not rushing, just letting the closeness speak. "Then we don't lose it. We don't let them take it from us." We stood there, suspended in the kind of quiet that only feels heavy when it's full of meaning. Her hands slid slowly around my waist, tentative but sure, and I held her tighter in return. For the first time since that first night at her doorway, there was no retreat. No pretending it was nothing. The warmth of her body against mine, the steady thrum of her pulse beneath my palm, it all told me the same thing: we were past the point of denial. Later, we moved to the couch, still close, shoulders pressed together, her legs tucked beneath her as though she'd finally let herself rest. She leaned into me, her head on my shoulder, the weight of her trust heavier than any kiss. "Maybe this is crazy," she said softly. I smiled, my thumb tracing circles over the back of her hand. "Then let's be crazy together." Her laugh was quiet, fragile, but real. And when she turned her face toward me, I kissed her forehead, slow, lingering, the kind of kiss that wasn't about desire but about promise. The world outside would keep spinning, people would keep whispering, but none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was that she wasn't pulling away anymore. What mattered was the warmth of her hand intertwined with mine, steady and sure. For the first time, there was no doubt between us. Only us. Red Heart, did you enjoy the story? Thought Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?